Hi, everybody. How are you doing today? Good? How's the tech spirit here on stage? On the tech stage? Good? Great? How's the Barcelona spirit here? Great? Yeah? Good or awesome? How's the Barcelona spirit? Awesome, yeah. Okay. So I want to ask you something today. I want to ask you, when was the last time, think about it, that you changed your mind on something relevant in your business, in your established company, in your startup? When was the last time that you changed your mind on something relevant? Think about it for 5 seconds. Good? Now, how many of you came here today because you want to hear about moonshots? How many of you came to this session because you want to hear about moonshots? Okay, most of you. Okay, that's good. Now, if you came here for moonshots, the first thing that you want to know about moonshots is that moonshots and moonshot thinking is about unlearning what made you successful in the past. And this is why it's relevant for you to think about when was the last time that you changed your mind on something relevant, something that you truly believe in that, and you finally changed your mind on that. What we know about moonshots so far is basically what we know from the work that has been done at the Google Moonshot Factory, at Google X, and the work that Astro Teller has done so far as captain of moonshots at Google X. So Google X defines a moonshot as something which is in the intersection between a huge problem, finding a radical solution for that huge problem by using a breakthrough technology or a combination of breakthrough technologies, and by having an impact on at least 1 billion people. Now, I want to ask you something. Come on. This is a 1 billion operation. Google X is a 1 billion operation within a 1 trillion company. So how much relevant is this for a C-level executive in this room here? How relevant is this for the family business in the room? How relevant is this for the entrepreneur, for the startup founder in the room? Is it relevant? Yes, but I wish I could have 1 billion for my moonshot factory in my company right now, right? So what concerns any C-level executive, any startup founder in the room, is that these days what we see is that corporate longevity is dramatically declining. And we know that this is because of the acceleration of disruption, because of the ability to make things from the past truly obsolete. So what we are seeing these days is that at the end of the day, disruptive innovation is becoming a new normal for us. It's becoming a new normal in our corporate, in our organizational landscape, right? Just have a look at this chart. The number of mentions of disruption and disruptive innovation in earnings calls from public companies has increased by 5-fold in the last 10 years. We are increasingly used to read, to see headlines like this. How not to get Netflixed. This one is a fun one, right? Uber your business before it gets Kodaked. This is a very good one. So my proposal for you today is that instead of talking about moonshots, why don't we talk about moonshot thinking? Because this is something that each of you, it doesn't matter if you are a startup founder, a C-level executive from an incumbent company, it doesn't matter. This is something that you can take for your job for next Monday. So let's think about a mental model which is based on prioritizing 10x improvements instead of 10% improvements. And we will use this as a proxy to anticipate disruptive innovations, or by you becoming the disruptor altogether, right? Now, in order to go about it, I want to share a couple of key learnings, 3 key learnings that I have taken away in the last few years by teaching to C-level executives, to startup founders in a number of programs with a number of companies. These 3 key learnings start with the why. So why is disruptive innovation happening these days? So number 1, disruptive innovation is accelerating these days because we see more people trying it more times, right? And the reason why it happens is because the cost of launching a startup these days is like 1,000 times lower than a few years ago. But the second reason, and still more important than that, is that the possibility for an entrepreneur to reach an unlimited upside, a disproportionate advantage these days, is more important than ever before. And the reason why you as an entrepreneur, you can reach this upside is because entrepreneurs these days are sitting in a sort of platform of superpowers. Let's take one of those superpowers, which is the ability to reach something like infinite resources around you, okay? Physical non-assets, like Airbnb does with assets that are not internalized in the company, right? Or something like what Fortnite did, what Epic Games, the company producing Fortnite, did a couple of weeks ago, which is a massive strategic pivot, turning Fortnite into a platform, which means that Epic Games is tapping into something which was a non-asset previously for them, which is the talent of developers, right? Or look at the infinite resource of the new abundance of technologies and the way that technologies can combine, the way that technologies can converge. Take David Pistoni, an entrepreneur from Valencia. He's working in the convergence between space technologies and railway technologies on the Hyperloop in Spain. Or take this startup in Los Angeles, Relativity Space, working in the convergence between space and 3D printing by printing rockets which have 100 times less parts than a common rocket and 10 times less building time. Or take Redefined Meat, a startup which is in the convergence between material science and 3D printing. This is why Scott Kapoor, one of the partners at Andreessen Horowitz, as you know, probably the most iconic venture capital in Silicon Valley, says that what entrepreneurs have the ability to do these days is the ability to provide a painkiller, 10x improvements, which are painkillers to existing problems, in contrast to providing something like a vitamin supplement. And this is why entrepreneurs can provide solutions that have something like 0 market risk. If those solutions work, they are going to have like a 99.99% level of adoption. So what we see these days is that the barrier that has really lowered down for everybody is the barrier of thinking big. Thinking big is more accessible. The second key learning, the second takeaway, has to do with the what. What is really disruptive innovation about? 2 considerations, one for the short term. I love to go to etymology when we don't really understand about the meaning of something. If we go to the etymology to understand about disruption, we will see that disrumpere, which is the Latin word for disruption, means breaking things into smaller pieces. And this is extremely relevant. This is extremely relevant because one of the superpowers of any startup founders these days is that you have the ability, you have the possibility to take an existing business model, to scan the business model, to unbundle the business model in pieces, and take one piece away of this business model. Let's see an example. If you are in the automotive industry, you are an automotive company, Your business model is as easy as a bundle. And the bundle is, I am selling cars, right? But within this bundle, you are selling a solution for going from A to B. You are selling status if you buy a Porsche or you buy whatever. And you are selling a driving experience, the joy of driving for those who love driving, right? It turns out that one of these pieces, it's just an algorithmic piece. It's just a codifiable piece. Take me from A to B. And if you are Uber, or if you are Lyft, or any other, or Didi Chuxing, or any other car-hailing company, it turns out that this is a codifiable piece from where you can disrupt the entire industry. And every business model, it doesn't matter the industry where you are working at, or the industry that as an entrepreneur you are going to disrupt. It doesn't matter. Every business model has a codifiable algorithmic piece like this one. And this is the reason why 10 years ago, Marc Andreessen said that software was eating the world. Take Gojek, a company in Indonesia. The founder of Gojek, Nadiem Makarin, started Gojek as a motorbike ride-hailing company. And now, by scanning the business model of multiple industries, he has found a way to disrupt 16 industries besides ride-hailing. And one of the industries that he is disrupting is banking. And actually, Gojek is the second bank in Indonesia right now. Now, in the long term, because the pieces of your business model are unbundled at some point, it's going to produce architectural innovations. Let's take, for instance, the electric vehicle. An electric vehicle has like between 5 and 10 times less parts than a combustion engine vehicle, right? This is REE, a company founded by Daniel Barel, an Israeli entrepreneur, which is literally taking the whole parts of the engine of an electric vehicle and putting those parts inside the wheels of the vehicle, which at the end of the day is changing absolutely the architecture of the vehicle and turning it into a modular product, unlocking entirely new business models from that conception. And the key learning number 3 is about the where. So where do disruptive innovations happen these days? So the bad news for those working at established companies and the good news for those starting up a company is that disruptive innovations happen in your blind spot if you are an established company. Happen in a pie that has nothing to do with the pie where you are competing as a company. If you're in the automotive industry, this is what you see. You are working at Toyota or at Volkswagen, this is what you see. This is your competitive landscape. But there is a lot that you don't see in your blind spot. You don't see those car-hailing companies disrupting a piece of your business model. You don't see the Waymos of the world. You don't see Google disrupting the automotive industry, right? And the reason why you don't see that is because the Ubers or the Waymos of the world are not competing. Because one of the keys of disruption is that you don't compete. You are disaggregating a piece and you are reaggregating that piece in a pie totally away from the pie where the competitors used to compete before. And it happens in the boundaries of your business. Food companies these days don't see, it's totally in their blind spot, how virtual or cloud kitchens are going to disrupt the entire industry. And you probably see that, but if you're an established company, you are late to that. You are late to those companies who are reinventing the architecture from scratch, which is what Tesla is doing in the industry, right? And this is why, if you are working in the Swiss watch industry, you don't see the smartwatch from Apple, which is actually selling more watches than the entire Swiss industry. Because it's in your blind spot. So now what? Now what? Incremental thinking is the right thing to do. Come on, this is what I do, at least in my job, 90%, 80% of my time. Incremental thinking is the right thing to do. However, incremental thinking is going to take us every time, every single time, to what the legendary professor who actually passed away a couple of weeks ago, Clayton Christensen, mentioned about the innovator's dilemma like 20 years ago. And he said something like, you know what? When you are focusing on sustaining innovations, when you are focusing on incremental innovations, you will be focusing on better serving your current customers, on making your current assets more efficient. You will be focusing on what already exists, and you will be incrementally focusing on that, and you will be extremely focusing on that. And at the end of the day, you are going to leave a flank around you where new entrants will cover underserved segments of markets or clients. So in a way, you need to balance your incremental thinking with your exponential thinking. My proposal for you, if you are a founder, if you are an executive, my proposal for you is that you don't consider 10x thinking or moonshot thinking as a virtual reality glasses, but as augmented reality glasses. It's not about detaching yourself from reality, but about using glasses that will allow you to see a new layer on top of your day-to-day, a new layer of 10x thinking. Let's do an experiment here. Let's say that I'm going to ask you on this side here to think about how would you improve the revenue of an airline where you are at the C-level, you are the CEO, the CMO, CTO, doesn't matter. How would you improve revenue of an airline by 10% in 2 years? Think about it for 1 minute. You can discuss this with your partner sitting next to you. And I'm going to ask you here about improving the revenue of the same airline by 10x in 10 years. I want you to discuss this with your partner for 1 minute. Let's do this experiment here. 10%, 2 years, 10x in 10 years. The way to accelerate your thinking is telling you that I'm going to ask somebody, okay? Okay, we are going to share a couple of thoughts here. Who wants to say one action? Very easy, right? Just one action to increase by 10% the revenue of the airline company in 2 years. Somebody from the 10%ers here. In English, Spanish, doesn't matter.
Selling neutral carbon trips.
Selling neutral carbon trips. Another one here. Somebody else? Down there? Sorry? Podeu fer arribar el micròfon?
Full door-to-door services from the rides to the airport to the experience afterwards and the hotels to increase the whole experience.
Okay, awesome. So improving the experience of your customers from the hotel to the airport. Awesome. 10Xers. Who wants to say something here? I see a hand raising. Okay.
Developing devices for one person to fly, unipersonal flying devices.
Developing the what, sorry?
Devices for persons to fly alone, unipersonal devices.
So you yourself flying.
Yourself
okay,
flying.
awesome. That's a very good example. Somebody else? Anybody else here?
Flying cars.
Flying cars, awesome. And I saw a hand raising down there, al final de tot.
Fly on hydrogen.
Flying on?
Hydrogen.
Hydrogen, amazing. Okay, so what is the main difference between the 10%er in those 40, 50, 60 seconds that you were thinking about it? The main difference between the 10%ers and the 10xers. How did your thinking differ? What do you think? I'm going to tell you 3 things, okay? And I'm going to tell you what happened when you were using moonshot thinking, when you were using 10x thinking in order to find a solution for this, right? Number 1, the 10xers here, in contrast to the 10%ers here, were forced to shift from product or from the current customer, right, to problems instead. And this is why somebody said, okay, you know what? We are going to fly like birds, okay? So it's going to be like an individual flight, right? Because you were thinking about the problem. What's the problem? Going from A to B, so let's find the best solution for that. So you were shifting from product. Somebody here was saying, we are going to improve the customer experience, but you were thinking about the current customers, right? So we were shifting here. We were forced automatically to shift from product to problems instead. And this is actually what entrepreneurs with superpowers do in order to find those painkiller solutions, right? And this is why, for instance, an airline company, and this is a true case, an airline company like All Nippon Airways is developing avatars to recreate the experience of being somewhere else, which is the problem that you are solving as an airline every day. You are taking people to somewhere else. What if an avatar can do that job for you, right? The second difference between the 10%ers and the 10xers is that when you are in the 10x side, when you are using moonshot thinking, you are forced to shift your mindset from improving my business model that already exists to rethinking the business model from scratch. And this is actually something that is going to help you to think like an entrepreneur, which is scanning an existing business model to find those codifiable pieces of the business model. And number 3, one of the main differences is that the 10xers here, those applying moonshot thinking, were forced to amplify the scope of competition. When you are thinking about 10% solutions, you are thinking about what your neighbor airline is doing, right? But here, you are forced to amplify your scope of competition. And you are forced to go beyond your current assets, to go beyond your current customers, and even getting into your non-assets or your non-customers. Let's take, for instance, Accor, the French hotel company, which has developed a platform for the non-travelers, which is their neighbors. Or let's take the case of All Nippon Airways that we mentioned before, which is trying to cater the segment of non-travelers from airlines by developing those avatars. So in a way, you, with moonshot thinking, with 10x thinking, you will be able to make your blind spot visible. To start, I'm going to give you 3 tips. Number 1, if you want to survive disruption, doesn't matter if you are in an incumbent company or you are starting a new one, you need to understand tech, you need to understand technology before technology understands your business or your industry, right? I love this quote from Ted Sarandos, the Chief Content Officer at Netflix, who said a couple of months ago, we want to become HBO before HBO becomes Netflix, right? And one tip for doing this is that I would tell you to become data-informed, but not data-driven. We were speaking about how you get an upside these days, how you get an unlimited advantage. And my tip here is that if you are totally data-driven, you are going to reach a local optimum. But to reach a global optimum, an upside, at some point you will need to make decisions which are non-linear, which are asymmetric, which will be informed but not totally driven by data. The second tip is that, come on, you need to combine those two layers, 10x thinking and 10% thinking. And the way to do that, combining moonshot thinking and agile thinking, the way to do that is that you need to calculate how many 10% increments you need to reach 10x thinking. And the only way to do that is to allocate the culture and the space, the room in your company to try it many times, to try it many times, to bat many times, to shoot many times. And you can only do that by avoiding this. You can only do that by avoiding the complacency and the arrogance that you remember, you can recall this, that Steve Ballmer showed when Steve Jobs was introducing iPhone in 2007, where he was laughing at the iPhone as something that was impossible to become a great product for a business customer, right? You need to avoid this. You need to avoid this because this is going to have an impact in your business. This had an impact in the shareholder value at Microsoft for 11 or 12 years, right? And this is totally in contrast with what has happened at Microsoft, one of the most interesting companies in the last few years, with Satya Nadella as a CEO. And one of the reasons why this contrast has happened is because Satya Nadella says that in order to transform your company, or in order to start up your business and make it sustainable down the road, you need to go from being a know-it-all company to being a learn-it-all company. And this is the reason why I started this talk by asking you if you had changed your mind in the last few months for some decision that had been relevant to you. Because it's all about becoming a learn-it-all company, a learn-it-all individual. And this is the only way that you will be able to anticipate disruptive innovations by using moonshot thinking, which is about unlearning what made you successful in the past. Moltes gràcies i visca el Barcelona Tech Spirit.